Today we'll be covering SCP-1730 to answer the simple question, what happened to Site-13? The 1730 article is a detailed report of a situation where the Foundation made a terrible mistake. It's full of numerous logs and interviews that, in the end, make for a great story. Remember that this video is only a summary. So much of the dialogue may be summarized into short explanations. To get the full experience of the article, I recommend you read it for yourself. SCP-1730 presents and resolves the mystery surrounding what occurred at Site-13. It's immediately apparent that SCP-1730 is classified as neutralized, indicating that it has either been destroyed, lost its anomalous properties, or is no longer part of our reality. The entity known as SCP-1730 is a sprawling complex of buildings marked as Site-13 of the SCP-Foundation. However, official records indicate that Site-13 was planned but never actually constructed. Originally, Site-13 was supposed to be located in Alaska, adding to the confusion since SCP-1730 is found in Texas. The site is in a state of extreme neglect, with numerous fuel leaks and fires due to a malfunctioning power generator that continues to run despite significant damage. Despite the site's condition, it is believed that some human survivors may still be present in the lower levels, as messages like danger, bleed, and what happened to Site-13 have been discovered on the facility's walls. Given the site's remote location, the Foundation initially set up basic containment measures, but eventually decided to send in teams to thoroughly investigate the facility. The first significant information comes from a log recovered from a Site-13 recovery team. This team had been dispatched to retrieve and secure an anomaly. According to the log, the anomaly entered one of the team members' mouths, causing them to bleed from every orifice. Following this, two entities emerged from the body. One absorbed all the blood, while the other re-entered the body, bringing it back to life. The team was forced to eliminate their reanimated teammate, but the log's author notes that their time is running out. They mention something that has been expunged from the record and hint that it's only a matter of time before something begins. The expunged portion of the log was removed due to it being marked as a cognitohazard, an element that poses a danger when perceived through any of the five senses, in this case, most likely sight. The log also details the team's use of C4 explosives to demolish a wall, making something illegible, likely the cognitohazard. However, the log indicates that it doesn't matter since Jones, another team member, went silent like the others, and they pushed him down an elevator shaft. Finally, the log mentions someone starting up the thresher, which will be explained later. The next key piece of information comes from an automated message that details the status of various systems within Site-13. This message was sent just minutes before a power relay explosion and an electrical disturbance. It reveals that almost every system at the site was either offline or compromised, including the containment systems for Keter-class anomalies. Additionally, the Euclid-class containment systems and the reactor were both in critical condition. The scene then shifts to the present, focusing on the exploration log of the first team the Foundation sent into Site-13. This team, known as D-12 Mobile Task Force or the Mudslingers, consists of 6 members, including their captain. They enter the facility through the unlocked front doors, turning on their lights to navigate the darkness. Immediately, they encounter messages scrawled on the walls, one of which ominously warns, "Don't look at the walls." They locate a service elevator still in operation and descend to the 3rd basement level. Once there, the team splits up to search the area, discovering that the rooms are filthy, coated in a metallic-smelling sludge. They come across a makeshift barricade near a door and find several bodies partially submerged in the sludge. A snake-like creature suddenly emerges from one of the bodies' mouths, which the team quickly neutralizes, only to discover that the bodies were hollow. The team decides to head back to the elevator, only to discover that the floor's layout has inexplicably changed, leaving them unsure if they are hallucinating or if the building itself is shifting. As they navigate a hallway that seems impossibly long compared to the building's schematics, they break into an office, where they encounter a naked human with flames emerging from its ears. Site Command receives only an intense white light, the sound of searing flesh, and static from the team's microphones for over a minute. Then, the audio picks up slithering noises, a cry, and choking sounds. Other strange noises continue until the two members who had split from the group finally respond, stating they are near the elevator and had believed their radios were malfunctioning. However, their camera feeds abruptly show them in a different room, with one member hanging upside down, both stark white and facing each other. Blood streams from their mouths, nostrils, and eyes, covering their faces, while a large object moves in the background, accompanied by slithering sounds from multiple directions. One of the team members opens their eyes, and the video and audio feeds suddenly cut out. This was the last communication site command received from the mudslingers. The exploration of the main structure had clearly become extremely perilous, so the Foundation decided to delay a more extensive investigation. In the meantime, they opted to send a small team to the power station to assess the damage. MTF-Y24, known as Gulliver's Travelers, is a 3-person team assigned to enter the power station. Upon arrival, they find the first set of interior doors locked and bulletproof. Instead of using explosives, which could risk collapsing the structure, Site Command attempts to locate someone who might know the clearance code for the door. Surprisingly, despite this site never being constructed in this reality, Director Jameson's clearance code, intended for when the site would have been built, successfully grants the team access. Once inside, the team inspects the power cores and deploys a micro-drone for a closer examination. The drone reveals that 7 of the 12 cores are irreparably damaged, 3 are operating below full capacity, and 2 are functional, though one of those is dangerously superheated. As the team explores further, they encounter more of the sludge seen by the previous team. They then discover 10 stark white bodies bound to the superheated core with wire. Below the bodies, written in what appears to be blood, are the words, "What happened to Site-13?" The team descends a stairwell and finds a door at the bottom that has been forcibly pried open. A foul smell greets them, and their camera feeds begin to distort. Shortly after, their audio feed cuts out entirely. Site Command only receives sporadic communications for the next 15 minutes, during which the team appears to encounter more dead humans covered in sludge. The last communication suggests they may have encountered a living person before Site Command loses contact entirely. Analysis of the recovered sludge from the microdrone reveals a mixture of blood, power core residue, and an unknown biological substance. A week later, the team's video feed briefly returns for 13 seconds, showing several humans standing around and looking down at a table. The Foundation needed more time to prepare for the next manned exploration, so they decided to deploy an unmanned drone to investigate the lower floors of the main complex. The drone was sent through the same entrance used by the first team and began descending in the elevator toward the lowest basement level. However, after reaching the 7th floor, a power failure halted the elevator. The drone then forced the doors open and manually descended to the 8th basement floor, which housed a Euclid containment wing. As the drone inspected several rooms, it noticed a vaguely humanoid figure standing at the end of the hallway. The drone followed this entity, which seemed unaware of its presence, observing as it picked up some of the sludge from the floor and marked a nearby wall. The symbols it inscribed were later identified as cognitohazards, which the drone captured in photos. Interestingly, the entity left no footprints in the sludge as it moved. Continuing its exploration, the drone entered the containment area and discovered a cell containing a human-like figure covered in sludge, with sparks emanating from its fingertips. A sign on the door indicated that this entity, designated as 324, was scheduled for termination in December of 1975. The drone discovers another locked cell and forces it open, revealing a deceased woman on the floor with no traces of sludge in the room. An identification badge on the body bears the name Jack Bright. Dr. Bright is a well-known figure in the SCP universe, known for his immortality, which he achieves by transferring his consciousness into different bodies using SCP-963. The drone then descends to the next floor, where it finds a functioning computer terminal running an older version of the SCP Foundation's operating system. The drone begins transmitting accessible files back to Site Command, but contact is soon lost. At this point, the cognitohazard previously viewed by Site Command activates, causing affected personnel to fall silent and begin burning from their ears. Any subsequent audible sound triggers a silent explosion, shaking Site Command and destroying much of their communication equipment. While the drone successfully transmitted the files, it was never recovered. I'll briefly skip ahead to discuss the various files that the drone successfully transmitted back to Site Command. One of the files is a correspondence from an engineer to Dr. Hadley, the site's chief biologist and assistant director of anomalous biology. In this message, the engineer warns Dr. Hadley about the thresher device she was working on. The engineer notes that while the reactors could generate enough power to activate the device, they would likely be destroyed in the process. The engineer also emphasizes that the thresher device remains highly unstable and that using it could potentially destabilize the local reality. Another correspondence comes from a member of the SCP Foundation's Ethics Committee, who also serves as the head of the Global Occult Coalition's Ethics Board. This individual informs Dr. Hadley that she is not allowed to transfer out of Site-13. The communication also hints at Dr. Hadley's concerns regarding Site-13's director and the protocols for terminating humanoid SCPs, suggesting internal conflicts within the site. The individual emphasizes to Dr. Hadley that these anomalies are not recognized as human beings and therefore are not entitled to the rights afforded to humans. In another document, a test log details experiments conducted on reality benders who were subjected to hazardous conditions while wearing inhibitor devices to determine if they could alter reality to save themselves. The reality benders exposed to extreme cold, heat, and electricity were unable to prevent their own deaths, suggesting the inhibitors were effective under those conditions. However, when submerged in water, the inhibitor devices malfunctioned, leading to unpredictable outcomes. Interestingly, the test administrator is only identified by a number rather than a name, which is unusual for the SCP Foundation's standard practices. Another document is a message between engineers discussing a concerning buildup of toxic waste in the pit beneath the reactors. The waste, which is supposed to be transported off-site, continues to accumulate, raising the risk of a potentially catastrophic problem. A note from Director Emerson orders the immediate termination of all entities in the facility's humanoid wing through electrocution and incineration. This process appears to be the cause of the accumulating waste. Another message, from an engineer to Dr. Hadley, reveals that he tampered with the termination records for a boy with leech-like abilities who had been disposed of in the pit. Since the pit's output remains blocked, the boy's remains have not been removed. Finally, a message from Dr. Hadley to Director Emerson provides several critical details. Dr. Hadley references a containment breach she caused and criticizes Emerson for believing that killing the anomalous entities would stop their effects. She points out that the fact they were alive was the least anomalous aspect of them. Dr. Hadley then mentions a young boy named Elijah, who survived on blood and could absorb it through skin, similar to a leech. With the mental capacity of a toddler, Elijah did not choose his condition, yet Emerson ordered his incineration along with the others. However, the incineration failed to kill Elijah. When he came into contact with the bloody sludge, a highly anomalous process occurred, causing the dead SCPs to return in some form. This situation was further compounded when the thresher device was activated, severely distorting the local reality of the site and turning it into an exceptionally anomalous facility. The Foundation still needed a more comprehensive understanding of the facility, so they deployed another team to explore its depths. This team, MTF-Z9, known as the Mole Rats, was specifically trained to handle the challenges of exploring anomalous locations, making them well suited to navigate the reality warping effects within the site. The 5-member team entered the main structure, equipped with helmets designed to filter out any potentially dangerous writing on the walls, preventing exposure to cognitohazards. The Mole Rats descended to the 6th basement level and began their exploration, carefully navigating past sludge and bodies. Suddenly, the floor gave way beneath one of the team members, Z94, causing him to fall and suffer a leg injury that left him immobile. While the rest of the team searched for a stairwell to reach him, Z94 began to hear slithering noises around him. though he couldn't see anything in the darkness. As the tension mounted, gunshots echoed through the facility, when Z-93, who was watching over his injured teammate, spotted a leech-like creature approaching Z-94. The creature slithered into Z-94's mouth and began to crawl down his throat. In a desperate attempt to save his teammate, Z-93 fired at the creature but missed. With no response from the captain, Z-93 asked for permission to euthanize Z-94 to end his suffering. Receiving no reply but hearing Z-94's choking plea, Z-93 made the difficult decision to shoot. However, the floor beneath him also collapsed, causing him to fall and be crushed by debris. 5 minutes later, Z-94 went silent, only for the leech creature to emerge from his mouth. Z-94 then stood up, now reanimated, and retrieved his fallen teammate's weapon. For the next 3 hours, Site Command received no communication from the remaining mole rats. Suddenly, the 3 remaining team members resumed communication, reporting that they were now seemingly below the 15th floor. Z-94's camera feed briefly returns, revealing a disturbing scene of several humans with flames emerging from their ears and a massive pit containing a large creature covered in smaller entities. Soon after, communication with the rest of the team is lost again for 4 hours until the captain's feed comes back online. She had apparently reached the thresher device on her own, but as she hears footsteps approaching, her light suddenly goes out. She starts running through the darkness, and then communication is lost once more. In the aftermath, it became evident that the facility was far too dangerous for further exploration, and it seemed that the Foundation's investigation into SCP-1730 would come to an end. However, one morning, monitoring equipment detected a looped transmission emanating from the facility. The transmission was from a doctor who had worked at Site-13, claiming that 12 people were still alive within the complex, surrounded by hostiles and running out of supplies. The doctor also mentioned that the transmission would cease once he was dead, indicating that there were still living humans inside, for now. In response to this, the Foundation authorized a rescue mission. A new 5-man team, MTF Apollo 3, known as the Game Wardens, was dispatched to continue the exploration of the facility and locate the survivors using the coordinates provided by the doctor's transmission. The team entered the main structure and headed directly for the stairwell, planning to descend to the lowest floor. After nearly 10 minutes of descending, they discovered that the staircase abruptly ended, giving way to a strange liquid void. Site Command informed them that they were actually about 15 meters below where they had believed the stairwell would end. Suddenly, the liquid began to rise, forcing the team to retreat upward. During the ascent, one of the team members had his legs enveloped by the void. After pulling him to safety on the next floor, the team found that his legs had been cleanly severed at the knees. Strangely, despite the absence of his lower legs, the team member could still feel them as if they were intact. And, even more anomalously, he was able to stand as though nothing had happened. As the team passes their hands beneath the injured member, they find that he appears to be floating, yet he reports feeling completely normal. Continuing their exploration of the floor, they come across a rotting corpse that they recognize as Zachary, unaware at first that it is deceased. This figure seems to be SCP-1500, and its anomalous effects are bypassing the visors the team is wearing, which are meant to filter out cognitohazards. The team continues conversing with the corpse until Site Command updates their visors, revealing that it is merely a lifeless body. Soon after, they encounter a shimmering humanoid entity that distorts the environment around it as it approaches. One of the team members gets caught in the entity's field, suspended and twisted in mid-air. The team attempts to neutralize the entity by firing at it, but their bullets simply spiral around it, ineffective. The entity then strikes at one of the members with an appendage, but the team deploys a miniature reality anchor, which causes the entity to disperse, neutralizing the immediate threat. They discover the team member who was caught in the entity's field, now partially fused with the wall, ceiling, and floor, presumably deceased. Realizing that retreating would be just as dangerous as pressing on, the team decides to continue their mission. Eventually, they enter a communications room where a screen suddenly flickers to life, displaying a standard containment cell with a single figure inside. One of the team members identifies the figure as SCP-993, Bobble the Clown. However, the figure insists that it is not Bobble, but rather something that used to be Bobble. The figure explains that Director Emerson tampered with the very fabric of the universe, causing irreparable damage. It reveals that every anomalous entity the Foundation and the Global Occult Coalition could capture was brought to Site-13, where they were either destroyed or exploited for gain. The figure, now heavily disfigured and distorted, expresses deep hatred for Director Emerson. Despite this unsettling encounter, the team decides to move forward. Site Command loses contact with the team for 30 minutes. During this time, the team discovers a group of survivors numbering in the 20s, including some members of the Mole, Rats, and one of Gulliver's travelers. However, the team learns that they have actually been down there for 3 days, not 30 minutes, and are surrounded by hostile, anomalous entities. The chances of surviving, let alone completing the rescue mission, seem increasingly slim. Enter Mobile Task Force Tau 5, known as Samsara. Samsara has a unique history. They are essentially cloned cyborgs, created from the remains of a dead god. They possess extraordinary regenerative abilities, various technological enhancements, and the ability to have their memories uploaded into new clones of their bodies, making them effectively immortal. Despite these advantages, this rescue mission still carried significant risks, but Samsara was the best team equipped for the task. The Samsara team consists of 4 members, each outfitted with advanced arm-mounted incendiary cannons, shock-absorbing leg extensions, heat-resistant armor plating, and built-in ocular filters, among other enhancements. The team entered the facility through a drainage pipe, soon deciding to split up. 2 members continued down the pipe toward a detected heat source, while the other 2 broke through a thin wall into a room with offices. As they explored, they discovered a control room for the incinerator. The other 2 team members soon rejoined them, reporting that the pipe was completely blocked. Together, they activated the incinerator machinery, which began to spin and generate increasing heat as the system powered on. The team spots a gate at the bottom of the area and decides to take a direct route by shooting out the control room window and jumping down. They follow another drainage pipe, which leads them into a cistern where they notice numerous cracks in the walls. From these cracks, small leeches begin to emerge, feeding on the sludge and rapidly growing in size. One team member quickly realizes that something massive lies beneath them, serving as the host for these leeches. Suspecting that the leeches might be telepathic, the team hijacks one of the leech's brains to generate a rough map of the facility. However, the map is distorted due to the facility's constantly shifting layout. Using the map, they pinpoint the location of the survivors and decide to take the quickest route, even though it leads through an area where the leeches exhibit unusually quiet behavior. Climbing out of the cistern, the team heads to a nearby stairwell, which is mostly destroyed. They drop down, using their leg implants to absorb the impact, and enter a server room. The room is chilled to 20 degrees Celsius, thanks to a cryonics chamber directly above, and they quickly notice that the environment is eerily silent, with no sound at all audible within the room. As the team cautiously advances through the server room, their cognito-hazard filters begin to trigger, alerting them to potential dangers. They soon spot a massive entity moving through the room, a humanoid construct with 6 legs, 18 arms, 36 forearms, and 72 hands. Each limb is engaged in constant, intricate gestures, which seem to be responsible for the eerie silence enveloping the room. Instead of a head, the entity has an emaciated, charred human figure bound to its chest, struggling against its restraints. This figure continuously screams, though the scream is only perceived as a persistent whining sound. The word Emerson is seared into the figure's flesh, apparently by a piece of molten fabric. Recognizing the entity as hazardous to observe, the team swiftly moves on. Suddenly, the whining sound grows louder and closer, prompting the team to detonate a proximity mine behind them as they rush through a nearby door. As they do, white-hot glyphs start appearing in the air around them. In the chaos, one of the team members loses an arm, but they manage to escape the server room. As they leave, sound abruptly returns to the environment, signaling their successful exit from the perilous area. The team soon locates the survivors, with one of the mole rats jokingly referring to Samsara as the Power Rangers. As they regroup, leeches start emerging from cracks in the nearby walls, shifting the mission from a search to a rescue operation. The extraction process begins, involving 11 MTF members and 27 Site-13 staff members, many of whom are severely injured. Their plan is to head to the Thresher device and reduce its power temporarily to create a stable route to the surface. Destroying the device outright is too risky, as it could lead to catastrophic consequences, including their deaths. With Samsara leading the way, the group starts their journey, taking out as many leeches as possible along the way. They soon come under attack from the floating humanoid entity previously seen by the drone, the one that was marking the walls. However, the team overwhelms it with a barrage of bullets and incendiary rounds, eventually bringing it down. Immediately after, the floor beneath the entity collapses, revealing a long, slick creature covered in eyes and sporting a mouth full of sharp teeth. The creature quickly devours the corpse of the humanoid, and a swarm of leeches is propelled toward the group. 2 members of Samsara provide covering fire, allowing the rest of the group to retreat and find an alternate route. As they move into a hallway, they are confronted by a cloud of crystal butterflies, identified as SCP-553. The Samsara captain takes on the butterflies alone, using his flamethrower to incinerate them, though he suffers severe injuries, with most of his flesh being shredded and scorched in the process. The group soon reaches a locked door leading to the Thresher wing, which they are unable to open. However, the door suddenly unlocks on its own, and a monitor flickers to life, displaying the distorted figure that was once Bobble the Clown. The figure laughs, suggesting it was responsible for unlocking the door. The team proceeds into the room, where they find the Thresher device, surrounded by hundreds of small, flying creatures. As they debate their next move, a wall nearby collapses, allowing the many-eyed creature from before to enter the room. The small, flying creatures immediately descend upon the large entity, attacking it as it begins to devour them with long tentacles. While the team works on manipulating the Thresher device, another section of the floor gives way, and yet another long, tentacled creature emerges. A fierce battle ensues, with the MTF members fighting off the entities. In the chaos, one team member is killed, but the others continue to operate the device, striving to stabilize the situation. Eventually, the team forces the larger entities to retreat, eliminating the remaining small creatures. As the facility begins to rumble and shake, accompanied by loud screeching noises and mechanical sounds, the team knows it's time to make their final ascent out of the complex. With the Thresher device now operating at low power and local reality somewhat stabilized, they begin their climb, hoping to reunite with the other 2 Samsara members along the way. As they move, they encounter SCP-2316, a dangerous cognito hazard that manifests as bodies in the water that people believe they recognize. Samsara urges the group forward, preventing anyone from falling victim to the illusion. They soon enter a large garage, where they come face to face with a massive mechanical construct, seemingly under the control of SCP-1330. The small robot attempts to intimidate the group, proclaiming itself as the herald of destruction. However, a Samsara member easily dismantles the robot, disabling the construct. The team reunites with the other 2 Samsara members, but just as they prepare to continue their escape, they hear a loud crashing sound from below. The floor begins to buckle under the pressure, forcing the group to flee. In the chaos, they lose a researcher, but the rest manage to push forward, racing against the collapsing structure. At the bottom of the enormous pit, the group glimpses a colossal black mass, covered entirely in red eyes, with several other large, dark forms extending from it. This entity is believed to be Elijah, the Leech Boy. As they flee, the group is pursued by black tendrils emerging from the hole, forcing them deeper into the facility. Finding themselves trapped with no way to ascend, one of the mole rats leads them further down into a vast containment chamber. The civilians are directed to the far end of the chamber, where an access point offers a potential escape route leading up to the power station and out of the facility. Meanwhile, the MTFs prepare to cover their retreat. Suddenly, a massive wall crumbles, and the 200-meter-tall leech boy enters the room. A naked human woman is grotesquely fused to its tongue, and the creature lets out a deafening scream as the MTFs unleash their full arsenal upon it. While the battle rages, a few team members work frantically to open two massive containment doors. After intense effort, the doors finally give way, releasing two of the most powerful entities known to the Foundation. The ensuing chaos is their last hope to either subdue the Leech Boy or escape the facility altogether. One of the entities released is SCP-001, the Gate Guardian, a colossal winged figure wielding a massive, fiery sword. The other is SCP-2845, an entity resembling a deer, with a rotating ring of ice and metal behind its head. The Gate Guardian possesses the power to obliterate anything in its vicinity with its sword, while SCP-2845 can instantly transmute and reconstruct matter, making them both incredibly formidable opponents. As these three entities engage in an epic and unimaginable battle, the MTFs seize the opportunity to flee toward the civilians. However, their escape is complicated when metallic cylinders crash through the stairway leading upwards, severely damaging it and killing the Samsara captain. In a desperate bid to buy more time for the others, the leader of the mole rats chooses to stay behind, joined by one of the Samsara members, while the rest of the group continues their ascent to the surface. The two remaining MTF members make their way back to the Thresher device, pushing it to full power. As the mole rat's captain laughs hysterically and unleashes a wild barrage of gunfire at the Leech Boy, the people above ground hear a deafening crackling sound. The area around the facility begins to distort, and then, in an instant, Site-13 vanishes, leaving behind a massive crater. No further transmissions are received, and SCP-1730 is officially marked as neutralized. The debriefing begins with a mix of emotions. One of the Game Warden members appears deeply traumatized, while the captain of Samsara declares the mission a success, despite expressing sorrow over the loss of the mole rat's leader. The Game Warden member who lost their legs but can still stand shares a disturbing observation. It doesn't feel like phantom pain. They can actually feel their legs, and sometimes they sense something wet and furry brushing against them. During the interview with the Samsara member who stayed behind with the mole rat's captain, more unsettling details emerge. The Samsara member reveals that they disabled their cameras upon entering a server room because they experienced a vision they believed to be a cognitohazard. In this vision, they stood on a precipice overlooking a vast expanse where countless humans screamed, all missing their hands, as the sky above them burned. A falling star descended, scorching billions of corpses, and at the heart of the star was the many-armed entity they had encountered earlier. The visions continued, showing coils of fire, storms of tormented souls, a void at the center of the universe, and a god of nightmares. The Samsara member looked away, unable to bear the sight, but the mole rat's captain continued to watch. Afterward, the captain made her way to the Thresher device and activated it, stating that she needed to bury what she had seen in darkness, all while laughing and crying uncontrollably. The final interview is with Dr. Scott, the Assistant Director of Temporal Studies at Site-13, who provides a detailed account of the site's history and the alternate timeline from his reality. According to Dr. Scott, the plans for Site-13 were initiated after the Foundation recovered the body of a massive sea creature that they were unable to contain. As a result, Site-13 was constructed in a remote area of Alaska, becoming the largest facility of its kind at the time. He cites history took a darker turn when a terrorist used an anomaly to trigger an explosion that killed thousands. In response, the US government cut off all funding to the Foundation. During this crisis, Paul Manafort, a former staff member of President Dole, was appointed as Secretary General of the Global Occult Coalition. Manafort orchestrated a partnership between the GOC and the Foundation, eventually leading to the GOC gaining control over the Foundation. With this new alliance, the Foundation once again received funding from the US government and the United Nations. Site-13 became the premier containment facility for the Foundation, undergoing continuous expansion. Emerson eventually rose to the position of site director and began carrying out horrific actions, allegedly under orders from Manafort. The incinerator, originally constructed to dispose of the massive sea creature's body, was soon repurposed for more sinister uses. It became a tool for disposing of all manner of anomalies, as well as a facility for conducting invasive tests on anomalous creatures and humanoids. The situation at Site-13 deteriorated further when vivisections began, sparking outrage among the remaining ethical voices within the Foundation. When the Ethics Committee attempted to intervene, their chairman was forcibly removed and executed, accused of being a traitor. The phrase "for the greater good" became a justification for increasingly horrifying actions. Dr. Scott recalls that the site even claimed to have contained the Abrahamic God, possibly a reference to SCP-343, though Scott admits he has no idea how they managed such a feat. Dr. Hadley, who strongly opposed Emerson's orders, was targeted as a result. One night, guards brutally assaulted her, inflicting severe injuries that impaired her mind. This trauma led her to trigger the containment breach that would follow. Desperate to regain control, Emerson approached Dr. Scott, urging him to activate the highly experimental Thresher device to contain the situation. Scott, however, refused and chose to flee, gathering his team in an attempt to escape the facility. Before they could make it out, the Thresher device was activated, causing a catastrophic warping of reality. Dr. Scott considers himself incredibly fortunate to have survived, though he suspects they could have been trapped between dimensions for what might have felt like 1,000 years. Now that the device has been reactivated, the consequences are entirely unpredictable. There's no telling when or where they might end up next. As I mentioned, I've condensed a lot of details and omitted most of the dialogue, so I highly recommend exploring this one yourself to fully grasp the events that unfolded at Site-13. The complete experience offers much more depth and context than what I've summarized here.